Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Just to let you know, PolicyWISE works across the UK and Ireland. We bring together research, policymakers, and look for opportunities to share learning across all the governments of the UK and Ireland. We're really excited today to hear from Vicky, Rob and Rhys about their research that they're going to be explaining and exploring this afternoon. It's really important to us at PolicyWISE that we share the experience of Tenants as part of the decarbonisation journey and as part of our work around building greener spaces. This is part of a series of webinars exploring the links between policy and research and trying to make sure that what we're doing at PolicyWISE is sharing the learning from one area into all parts of the UK. Next week, there'll be an opportunity to hear from the current Hayward Fellow working at Oxford University and the wider project team about how she's been designing a national strategy that is truly inclusive of all corners of the United Kingdom, and how tackling future problems should be a core capability of the state. And we'll put the notes about that webinar up in the chat, so please feel free to join us next week at this time as well. There is going to be time at the end for question and answers, so please do get thinking of your questions. We'd love you to put your cameras on to join in the conversation, but I do appreciate that it's lunchtime and some of you will be trying to multitask during this session. So just if you feel comfortable doing so. Lee's here handling the chat. If you're having any technical problems, do let us know, but hopefully that will all go smoothly. I'm excited today to introduce Rob Milligan, Funding and Partnerships Manager from TypeAlb, Vicky Cooper from the Open University, where she's a Senior Lecturer in Social Policy and Criminology, and Rhys Norris, Sustainability and Decarbonisation Engagement Officer at Cunnintaff Community Housing. So if that's okay, I think we're going to make a start. Please do let us know if you've got questions, and as I said, there'll be lots of time at the end to join in. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, Shemai folks. I think we're going to share some slides and yeah, that way not everyone's looking at me the whole time, which I always prefer. Yeah, fab. Oh, amazing. Thanks, Vicky.
Okay.
Yeah, great. Okay. Well, let's get going. So thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here today. As Catherine said, I'm Rob Milligan, Funding and Partnerships Manager at TypeAlb. So a bit of a Welsh lesson off the bat. Ty meaning housing, so T means house, Ty meaning housing, and Pawb meaning everyone. So TypeAlb, housing for everyone. As the name implies, we're a national charity in Wales, working across Wales to advance equality and social justice in housing. We work with housing associations, local authorities, third sector partners, and communities to make sure everyone has the right to a safe, accessible, and affordable home, regardless of their background or circumstances. Our work spans from practical support and training for housing providers through to research and policy influencing with Welsh Gov, always driven by the voices of tenants and people with lived experience. At the heart of what we do is the belief that housing is not just about bricks and mortar. It's about people, it's about fairness, it's about creating communities where people can thrive. Yeah, as I said, delighted to be part of this conversation today with the Open University and PolicyWISE, and to explore how we can continue working together on issues of equality, inclusion, and climate justice in housing in Wales. Yeah, just like looking through the participants today, amazing to see some of the people around the screen who have helped contribute to the research, and also amazing to see so many people that I don't know. So really great to be able to share further some of the work that we've been doing. So before we get on to some of the agenda points, the research that we're going to talk about, I just want to say a bit about, a just transition in housing. What is that? What is a transition to net zero in housing that is just and has justice intrinsic in it? The idea is kind of simple. Can we reduce the carbon output by both improving energy efficiency of homes and enhancing the overall quality of homes? And this should theoretically meet the dual aim of reducing fuel poverty. But to truly realize those benefits of this transition, we've got to understand a few things. We've got to understand who is most affected by poor energy efficiency, who is most affected by fuel poverty, and how these inequalities are manifesting. One thing I can say off the bat is not everyone experiences the impact of energy inefficiency in their homes equally. Studies show that those most likely to live in cold, damp, and thermally inefficient homes are people on low incomes, single parent households, racialized communities, and those with pre-existing health conditions. So you can see that this doesn't sit separate from the housing crisis. This perpetuates the broader inequalities that we already have within housing. We're going to explore elements of this claim today during the session. Another point I just wanted to make is that, in fairness to future generations, we need to deliver decarbonisation in housing in Wales at pace. As such, our government has set specific targets for housing providers to roll out the works necessary to improve energy efficiency of homes and lower the carbon output of Welsh housing. Lots of money is being spent in this space. Let's discuss some of the ways in which people can get left behind, though, and how we can be more inclusive as time becomes more and more precious. So yeah, just a note on sort of the running order then. As Catherine already said, me and Vicky are going to chat through some research that we've just published, and then I will be so I'm going to talk about the story of the research, the methodology. Vicky will get into the findings and the recommendations. Then we'll have Rhys jump in and share some of his insights as sustainability and decarbonisation engagement officer. That one's a mouthful. Yeah, and I think will be really interesting because Rhys is on the literal, excuse the pun, coal face of rolling out the technology and working alongside tenants who are having this new tech in their homes and the experience that they have and supporting them. After that, hoping we can have a bit of discussion. So yeah, please share your questions in the chat. Okay, so I think I sort of set that up. Should we jump into a bit about the research? Yeah, thank you, Vicky. Okay, so I think before we do the actual research, I hope it's interesting for people to hear a bit about the partnership, especially considering that we've probably got people from all over, and this might be interesting if you were looking at setting up partnerships between housing and academia in your own regions. So yeah, how did we come to partner with the Open University in the first place? So in 2021, as Tai Pawb, we set a strategic objective of advocating for a fair response to climate change, or an equitable response to climate change. And when we made that objective, we knew that we wanted to spend the next 5 years working on that. But we really didn't know what exactly that would entail. We knew that we needed to know more, basically, and that led us to explore research. And it was around that time that we started meeting with the Open University, with the partnerships management there. And there was initial discussions showed real synergy between what we wanted to do at Tai Pawb and what was important to the OU in Wales. So yeah, I suppose fast forward, we shaped a bit of a project then by the end of 2023, and we had secured internal funding from the Open University to take this project forward, and that was from the Open University Open Societal Challenges Fund, who were very good to us and funded the research. We focused the research on reaching tenants and understanding their experience. That was where we were coming from initially, but also on reaching industry experts and people in policymaking positions. So this led to outputs like the report that we're talking about today, dissemination and engagement outputs like blogs, events, magazine articles, academic articles, anyone who asks us to talk about this stuff, we will talk about this stuff. Basically, it means a lot to us. So I'm going to talk a bit about the research now. And before we get into that, I just say lots of people helped and shared to make the research possible. So yeah, a big, huge thanks to them. List as long as my arm, so I'm not gonna go through it. But yeah, thank you everybody who contributed. Yeah, it really means a lot. I think I don't know if this would be a good time also to chuck the new link in the chat to the research if you haven't already. Sorry, I'm not monitoring the chat. Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk through the methodology of the research before handing over to Vicky to talk about the juicy insights and the recommendations. So yeah, here we go. So the research study was carried out between October and December of 2024. Wow, that's time flies, doesn't it? Involved 3 in-person focus groups and 1 online focus group. The 3 focus groups were carried out with a total of 23 tenant participants who lived in social and some private rented accommodation. And then 1 focus group was carried out involving 12, what we're calling policymakers and professionals. But this included policy officers, managers from housing and homelessness organisations, TPAS, so that's Tenant Participatory, Tenant Participatory Advisory Service in Wales, urban design and planning civil servants, climate change civil servants, so that was Welsh Go and local council people, people from independent think tanks, Rent Smart Wales and the Chartered Institute of Housing, all sort of fed in. The way we designed the focus group questions is we did that as the research team, which is myself, Rob Milligan, Dr. Vicky Cooper, and we also had Dr. Freya Wise, who is a research fellow at the Open University and an academic expert on retrofitting and carbon reduction. So just a bit on what we asked. Tenant focus group questions, we asked about measures that tenants were adopting in their homes to reduce carbon. We asked them about positive and negative experiences of decarbonised changes made to tenants' homes. And we asked about the best approaches to them being involved in decisions about decarbonising housing. And then with the focus group that was aimed at policymakers and professionals, we asked about how can marginalised communities be more actively involved in the planning and implementation of decarbonising housing policies. We also asked how can trust be built between tenants, communities and local authorities and housing providers, and how can decarbonising measures and technologies be implemented and designed that responds to the needs and voices of tenants. And then a note on who we talk to, I suppose, when it comes to the tenant profile, the demographic, so to speak, the breakdown of that group was, so 68% were female, 32% were male, 88% white British, 3% black British, 3% Arab British, 3% Asian British, 3% white non-British, lots identified in different sort of non-British nationalities. 35% had physical disabilities, physical impairments or mobility issues, and 43% had mental health conditions, 17% supported or cared for someone else. So I'm thinking that's quite representative. That is, I think we spoke to quite a diverse bunch, but things like 35% of people having disability, that is quite representative of social housing in general. So I think that we did well to speak to a good diverse bunch, and that makes it quite relevant and robust. So I'm going to leave the methodology there. I've rushed through it a bit because I'm aware that it's not the most exciting bit. Feel free to ask further questions in the chat about the methodology. If that's stuff that's interesting to you, we're more than happy to talk more on it. But yeah, I'm going to go on to the findings and recommendations now. So without further ado, I'll introduce Dr. Vicky Cooper, Senior Lecturer in Criminology and Social Policy at the Open University.
Thank you very much, Rob. Just checking because I can't see my screen. Can everybody hear me and see me okay?
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, thank you so much, Rob. And just, in terms of our gratitude to everybody that supported us and the organisations, it helped in terms of generating understanding around these issues. TIPAUB have also been a major support in terms of help.
Vicky, you've frozen. Do you want to try turning off your camera and see if you can just speak through your bit?
Is what adjustments are tenants making to reduce carbon? And this was mainly just a question rather than think about behavioural change. This was mainly a question just to kickstart the conversation with tenants, just to think about, their awareness of reducing carbon within the home, and then what are their techniques and approaches. It was non-judgmental. It was just a way in to create a conversation about reducing carbon within the home, but it did generate a lot of very interesting findings. And so this was our first finding theme, which was around reducing carbon or reducing costs, and very much taps into, as Rob mentioned, issues around fuel poverty. So initially the conversations were around how tenants are reducing carbon, and many tenants talked about the virtues of the air fryer versus using the oven. Obviously, an air fryer does use less kilowatts per hour than an oven, so many tenants talked about the benefits of an air fryer. And also tenants talked about the benefits of a dehumidifier to manage issues around damp in the home, to reduce moisture in the home, therefore increase the efficiency of circulation of heat for when the heating is on in the home. But as the conversation went on, the techniques and approaches for reducing carbon within the home did become more drastic. So we had, for example, Margaret here talks about she didn't have her hot water on, she would turn her cold water off, she would turn her hot water off. She didn't need the hot water on, and it helped her to energy and reduce energy costs. And then other tenants, Olivia and Emma below, talked about not having the heating on, and they actually use layers in the winter, or they try not to have the heating on as much in the winter. And again, this is about saving costs rather than saving carbon. And again, energy consumption and reducing carbon was key to thinking about a number of tenants who have had issues with damp and mould in their home, and their struggles with managing damp and mould whilst trying to maintain some level of comfort, trying to remain warm in their home. It was quite difficult, as we see Shirley here talks about. Obviously the advice they receive is to keep the heating on a lot, keep the house as dry as possible, try not to produce any excess moisture, keep your home ventilated, make sure your windows are open, etc. But realistically, this isn't possible. So the realistic option for Shirley was to use heavy curtains, carpets for ventilation. And then other techniques for tenants managing energy efficiency and manage reduction within their home, around using tumble dryers as well. And for a number of tenants, the tumble dryer was useful to obviously dry their clothes indoors without producing moisture in their homes, and also to manage as much as possible within their homes. So a tumble dryer is the stop sharing. Can everybody see those slides? Just double checking.
Vicky.
Yeah.
There's a few times that you got stuck there. Shall I share, and do you want to turn off your camera?
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great.
I've
Thank you,
got
Rob.
the
Okay.
slides here. I've got a few sets of slides open, to be honest, but I think I've got the right slides here open.
Yeah, they're the
It
right
is,
slides. I'll stop sharing.
Yeah, but Vicky, if you turn off your camera, we'll probably be able to hear you better, if that's okay.
Yeah, my camera's off. Can you hear me okay? Great. And I've stopped sharing. Okay, brilliant.
I'm just going to put that in presenter mode. Fab. Everyone can see that. Is that the right slides?
Okay, yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you very much, Rob. Okay, so as I was saying, in terms of speaking to tenants about their own approaches to reducing carbon in the home, it became quite obvious to us that these approaches were about reducing cost. Many tenants talked about some drastic approaches, such as not having their gas heating on in order to manage their costs, not having hot water on, using the cold water to manage their costs. And if we move to the next slide, please, Rob. This became more apparent as we spoke to tenants who had issues with damp and mould within their homes, and they had issues with managing energy consumption and using energy and keeping their costs low whilst living in poor quality housing. So here, for example, Shirley says, the general advice is to keep the heating on, make sure the home is dry, make sure it's ventilated, but that's not realistic for her in terms of managing costs. It's far too expensive, so she doesn't have the heating on. And we see that a number of tenants also relied on the tumble dryer. Even though the tumble dryer is a energy intensive appliance, it was useful for tenants who have damp and mould in their homes in order to maintain and make sure that they're not producing any excess moisture within their homes. So they were relying on energy intensive appliances in order to maintain, manage the issues with damp and mould in their home. So reducing cost, if we can go to the next slide, please, Rob, thank you. So reducing cost was a significant motivation for reducing carbon within the home. Now, when we spoke to policymakers, professionals, think tank professionals about these experiences, those individuals and groups that we spoke to are acutely aware that social housing tenants are already making significant trade-offs in their everyday lives as they are struggling to heat their homes, especially if they're living in poor quality housing. And then if we're asking them to think of solutions of how to reduce carbon, we're doing that at a cost, and we're potentially making tenants significantly ill because they're already making significant trade-offs in their everyday lives. And there was an interesting discussion as well around, this is even more so important when we think about the carbon footprint of social housing tenants, and particularly for low-income households. There was a key debate around issues about asking tenants to be responsible for reducing carbon within their home, when their carbon footprint is already extremely low. But meanwhile, in policy terms, we're asking tenants to be responsible and aware of how much carbon they're using in their home. So there's a interesting and conflicting experiences for those tenants in terms of what they're doing already, and then what's expected of them in terms of behavioural change. If we can just move on to the next slide, please. Thanks, Rob. So that was our first findings, and this is a snapshot, obviously, so please do go to the report for a full discussion of these findings. So our next finding theme was around the advantages and disadvantages of decarbonising housing. So here we're getting to the nuts and bolts of tenants' negative and positive experiences of decarbonised housing. So we will start with the advantages, and this was one of the key advantages that tenants echoed to us in terms of their homes and their experiences of decarbonised technologies. Grace, for example, says that for her, having solar panels implemented was life-changing, significant reductions in her energy costs from £40 to £50 a week to £20 every 3 weeks. And that was especially significant for Grace because she did mainly run her home on electricity, so that was really useful for her. And again, also Emma talks about how having solar panels also helped her to keep her energy bills low, and also allowed her to use her tumble dryer when she really needed to use her tumble dryer. And she still had storage in her battery. She was able to feed into the grid. She was very adept with the technology. And we'll come back to these positive experiences because we saw an interesting correlation between positive experiences and quality level of housing support that they were given to help them transition and decarbonise the home. Next slide, please, Rob. Thank you. So as part of findings 2, we also obviously reviewed tenants' more negative experiences of decarbonised housing. And here we have Jenna, who was in a new build, completely decarbonised. She had a heat pump, solar panels, water tanks, fully insulated, but really struggled to have a shower for longer than 5 minutes without the water going cold. And she had a family, she had children, so it was very difficult to manage the mornings of everyone having a shower. And in fact, also she noticed that her energy bills were higher than where she lived previously, which ran on gas, mainly in terms of the heating and water system. And she also noted that she didn't have the housing support that she needed. She felt that, and she stressed that she had to chase her housing landlord quite a lot in order to help her resolve the issues with her solar panels, with her heat pumps, etc. And then we also hear from Alfred, who had solar panels, and he didn't know that he wasn't receiving benefits from his solar panels until his brother visited his property, who is an architect, knows about solar panels, and helped him to understand that he wasn't actually using the solar panels and he wasn't benefiting from solar panels. But again, Alfred stressed that to us that part of the issue was in chasing his housing landlord in order to help him understand what the issues were and how can they be fixed and how can he actually benefit with the solar panels that were in place. So again, in terms of the negative experiences, we also saw that with those tenant participants, there was a lack of housing support. So we'll come back to that point in our findings. Next slide, please, Rob. Thank you. And our third finding, this was a surprise to us, probably our naivety, but it was an overwhelming theme that came up in our findings and discussions with tenants, and that was overheating, particularly during summer months. Again, we hear from Alfred, who talks about how difficult it is in his abode to be. Margaret, who draws on some techniques as well about how she manages overheating in the summer months. She talks about obviously having a fan with ice to cool her, keep her cool in her home, but also she mentioned blackout curtains to keep her room from becoming extremely hot in the summer months. And then we hear from Martha, who practically moves into her garden in the gazebo during summer months because it's too intensely hot in her home. And the main thread running through those participants is their health issues. Martha's disabled, she has family with disabilities, so it was especially difficult for her and her family to be comfortable in the home. Margaret had issues with COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which meant that there was issues around shortness of breath, and so it was important for her to maintain cool and be cool during the months when she was overheating in her home. And Alfred had issues around liver disease, which means that it has been difficult for him to regulate his body temperature. So it is important for those tenants with pre-existing health conditions to make sure that they are comfortable and cool in the hot weather months, but their experiences obviously here, their experiences tell us that they were extremely uncomfortable during the summer months when it was overheating. And we'll just move on to the final slide. So that was just a whistle-stop tour of our key 3 themes. of our research. In terms of our conclusions and recommendations, obviously we're drawn on the data and going back to tenants who had experienced positive and negative experiences. We noticed that tenants with positive experiences of decarbonised technologies in their home also had quality housing support. They had a dedicated housing officer to help them manage that transition to low carbon household, to manage the technology around solar panels, for example. And equally, tenants who struggled with their decarbonised technologies didn't have the support. So our recommendation is that, and it may seem obvious, but it is hugely beneficial because it is a major transition. Housing landlords must invest in support as tenants are making the journey to housing. And mold forces tenants to make difficult decisions around energy consumptions. Those were our unequivocal findings. And we would like to recommend that there is the Welsh Government
Vicky, we're losing you a bit.
Free. Can you hear me now, Catherine?
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, so just give me a shout if. Okay, so I'll just go through that recommendation again about making homes damp and mold free and distinguishing between decarbonising housing strategies and the strategy to make homes damp and mold free. There are major overlaps between those twin strategies to decarbonise housing and a damp and mold free, but making home.
Vicky, we've lost you.
Sorry,
again.
I don't. Yeah.
I think should we head on to Reece now? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Really pleased that we've been joined by Reece, who's joining us from Tenants. Did you want to say anything, Rob? Or?
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to jump in and just cover the other two recommendations, if that's okay, just before we grab Reece. Have we got time? Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah. So just the other two sort of recommendations. There's a few more recommendations, but these sort of bring most of the recommendations together. A few of the things we noticed during our discussions, during our focus groups, is just how much we, well, as a research team, we learn from tenants who have this technology in their homes. So we have a recommendation around tapping into tenant expertise on this. So we have a recommendation for the housing sector to do more there around, just sort of platforming tenants and their experiences in a way to bring other people along and to create sort of positive discourse around this. Already starting to see that happening. And then there's these two recommendations around overheating, which we sort of talked about, and then there was the recommendation here around, tenant representation. So that's where we got to with the recommendations. They're all there in the report. We'd love it if you could go and read them. So I'll give way now. I just wanted to make sure we covered that. But yes, shall I introduce Reece? Yeah, Reece, if you want to jump in and give us an overview of how that resonates with your work. I won't do too much to introduce you because you can do it. Yeah.
Well, well, thank you very much, Rob, and thank you very much, Vicky. I appreciate being invited today to kind of share mine and Tenants' story in regards to the retrofit program and our interaction with tenants. And tremendous piece of research as well to provide, great insight and some meaningful recommendations and to help us to develop our approaches for the future. So diolch yn fawr I Type Pawb and the OU. So I'll stick to script as much as possible. I know time's precious and I do tend to deviate and wander off on tangents, but I'll try and stick to the script as best I can. But I started on the Optimised Retrofit Programme about 2.5 years ago now. I was brought in as an engagement officer where we're following challenges in convincing some tenants to participate on the project. So my background is not actually assets or buildings, it's housing and engagement. And when I started, my objective really was to try and bring tenants along on the process. My learning has grown significantly, and the learning has also grown for Tenants in responding to the variety of challenges that we've come across in delivering the programme. Speaking to colleagues in the sector, we've had similar experiences as other housing associations, but we've also had our own unique experiences and challenges from being a small valleys-based housing association. Unsurprisingly, the biggest challenges for us really is about no contact, or even encountering distrust, or more commonly uncertainty of the technologies that are being used. And I just want to, be clear that, we're not perfect. We have a model that kind of works for us, but even then we still try for continuous improvement, and learning from research like the research from the Open University and Type Hub, from other housing associations, and most importantly, our tenants. One of the challenges we've also faced has been in defining engagement, as there's often a divide between traditional liaison and coordination compared to, say, engagement and education of tenants, and kind of seeing them, although they're separate, they do have a lot of crossover, but it's important to have that definition and understanding of the functions. Also to say the grant funding tends to place significant emphasis on components and installation. However, it's necessary to have relatively equal importance in working with tenants over the longer term, and obviously that's come out in the recommendations from the research. It's not just about how many properties have you succeeded in installing measures to. We've tried to reach out further than quantitative numbers, and we've done some assessments on recipients and their perception on how the works have impacted their health and well-being, as well as a perception of retrofit, and to a certain extent climate change as well. We've also said about engaging with residents to help shape the language and approach to retrofit, identifying residents who have been through the process and shown an interest in learning more, as well as tenants who have yet to receive measures. So we carried out a series of workshops and surveys with the communications team Blue Stag, which is now Everglow, and they helped us to develop a campaign or some of materials, and linking in then to one of the recommendations from the report is that we went about trying to develop a website that's going to have information about retrofit measures, the programme, but most importantly using language defined through the engagement exercise. So using the language that tenants themselves have said works for them, or they've brought forward themselves. Having things like how-to videos and guides as a visual medium to break down the language and literacy barriers. But it's also, importantly, it's a tool for staff to use, as opposed to teaching each member of staff about each technology and they've got to remember every piece, and it's a useful resource to refer to then. So also in reference to the recommendation of the community-led approaches from the report, so 2025 in particular has been about giving context to staff through carbon literacy training on why we're carrying out retrofit works. But now that we've done a lot of that, we're looking at 2026 would be about giving context to tenants through carbon literacy and inviting them who have received, inviting those who have received retrofit works and have expressed an interest in learning more to attend training. We try and tap into the rich seam of tenant knowledge and interest in technologies and environmentalism or climate change, and where possible and appropriate, look to encourage tenants to explore local activism and to be enthusiasts for their neighbours and communities to speak to for insight and understanding. It's much better to have the benefits explained by a neighbour you trust and recognise than a representative of the housing association. So, but it's important, it's up to us then as housing providers to give the tenants the right information so that they can see the benefits themselves and share that with others. So, for example, looking through their smart meter data and showing the difference that the measures have made. So, in particular, solar panels. I know we talk a lot about solar panels, but they do seem to be the most succinct technology for showing the benefits and the impact really of decarbonisation measures. It's important to see as well the tenants. It's important to see tenants as a way forward and not the problem, as lower income households are more likely to have the smallest carbon footprint. Lower income households should have their voices amplified to not only set examples, but also because they will be at the sharp end of the consequences of climate change. It's not just about spending money and sticking things to properties to meet a target. It's about giving equal emphasis to the people who live in their homes and use or benefit the measures. Research has shown that without adequate support, information and encouragement, that the benefits of the measures can be lost over time. It's such a unique and valuable opportunity that housing providers have to identify people with interest and passion in the subject. So most tenants will mostly focus on financial benefits of the measures, especially those in severe poverty and are desperate to conserve as much of their income as possible. However, some will want to know more, and it's vital social housing landlords cannot only identify these potential ambassadors, champions or enthusiasts, but also provide the opportunity to grow their knowledge and develop their skills, either through linking with local environmental groups or directly with social housing providers themselves. So yeah, I think that's me covered. So I'll hand back to Vicky and Rob. So yeah.
Thank you, Ruth. That was really great hearing kind of your experiences and perhaps some of bringing that research to light, really. I suppose on that, my first question is, when you had a chance to look at the research, were there any particular areas that really chimed with your experiences, or perhaps conversely, you didn't think were that relevant?
I think some, it's not that it's not relevant, but the one thing that kind of stood out to me was, I know it's at the latter stage, but something about the overheating. And I think that's a really, I'm really glad that that's in there, because I think that's a suspicion that we've had. But to see it in a document actually is a great, canary in the coal mine kind of thing, to say we've got to be ready for these issues that are only going to increase later on. So I think that's something that we'll take back to consider how we approach, the retrofit measures and things longer term, and try and visualize housing in the future and what that's going to operate like. To be fair, there's a lot in there that rings true around financial motivations being the main priority, and that's understandable. But it's that confirmation element that's good to see, and it's really good to see as well the emphasis on recognizing the importance of the measures, but the support that needs to go alongside that. And I think that the desperation, and I suppose the simplicity of saying we can, we fitted so many of these solar panels, installations, and sector, that quantitative, that's easy counting. It's much harder to measure and define the impact of the support element. But saying that, we have been supported through Welsh Government to do some of the research we've done around some of the tenants and stuff. So that's good to see that the focus is shifting. But yeah, so those are some of the points that really stood out and will benefit.
That's really interesting. Rob or Vicky, do you have a kind of reflection following on from what we said, perhaps some of the other conversations that you've been having if you've been sharing the research?
So the piece on overheating, so after launching the research, we did workshops at TIPAB conference and at the research launch, and it continued to be a theme that's really important to people. And at the end of the day, climate change is about the climate getting warmer, and there were serious concerns, I suppose, around excess winter deaths becoming excess summer deaths, and this, it's just a stark thing to say, but it was something that we've discussed around, and people are really concerned about. And And yeah, it's absolutely compounded for disabled people, people with mobility issues. Yeah, so it was really important to people, and really important to people then in the subsequent dissemination stuff. Yeah, I suppose just feeding off what Reese has said, this bit about like quantitative versus like actually making a change. There was when we launched the research in North Wales, there were a lot of people there from local authorities. And there were people who were buying this tech and rolling it out at a very big scale. And they had just huge concerns around having to ever remove it from people's properties because it didn't work, because it wasn't the right one. And a lot of their work was around finding the right sustainable solutions. And I think where they found value in the research was that this is a really complex issue. This is a really complex thing to solve. All these houses are different. So there's no one size fits all. So for any sort of complex problem like that, you need to have rich consultation, co-production, because we're talking about sustainability. And that's the point here, is sustainability. We don't want to be taking this tech out of people's homes in 10 years to put a different, to different, more up-to-date stuff in there. So that's just something that you made me think of there, Reese. I've got a question for you, Reese. What was I going to say? I just know from talking to you this, so I was saying I have to talk about it. Any stories, like case study stories, your experience of people who are digitally excluded and how they've come along the journey. Because I do know from talking to you that you've brought like some people along that, would say that they were absolutely not technologically capable. But I suppose that's interesting to us now, is how have you brought those people on? What is like the nuts and bolts of like the interactions you have to keep them, keep their heating on and keep their bills low, I suppose.
I think I feel like I'm getting prodded and poked now. I'm recently, but I genuinely appreciate the interest, because there's a lady in particular. I think what surprises me, there's a perception whereby we kind of define social housing tenants as one thing, and they're not. People are people, and people are different, and they've got different motivations and different experiences and different backgrounds and all this. But what I like tech stuff, but not everybody does. But what I like to see is people surprising me where maybe my biases would assume that they aren't that way inclined. So there's one lady that I worked with that we put solar panels in, and a battery, and she was really eager to explore the overnight tariff. So she did the research. She was with a specific energy provider that provided the overnight tariff to charge the battery, and it was that ability. She'd ask me questions, and we kind of do the research together and trying to find out what works and what and how it functions. And now she's in a position where she went back to her provider, gave them the information they need, and now she's able to link her battery up so that it charges at lower rates, and then she then draws the electricity off during the day and then recharges the battery as well. So it's kind of, to me, that was like, that was really, really exciting. Afraid to be geeking out, but I got really excited over it. But I'm also conscious then is that on the flip side of that, there are people who might not be able to go into that level of detail, but they get the concept of the solar panels with a good explanation, and they don't need to be, they don't have a battery, they just have a solar panel, but they understand, the concept of it and what they need to do to make the most out of it. So you don't need to be the most technically advanced or technologically advanced person to benefit from it. And it's about how we communicate that with people. And all the time is the best way to do is to have those conversations. But obviously, you mentioned the scale of these projects and measures is that it's getting increasingly harder to do when you've got hundreds and hundreds of properties having the works done, and then there's only so many people who are able to have those conversations and getting out and interacting with people.
I've got a question here that's come in, if that's okay. We hear a lot about the mismatch between housing planning policy that promotes decarbonisation and the potential lack of skills in the industry to do that work at scale. Is this an even bigger issue for social housing, and in particular lower socioeconomic areas and those tenants? I know that's something I've certainly come across when I was working in housing, with that kind of what would be ideal in terms of the skills and skills development, and then trying to match that with the other priority areas. Is that something?
Yeah, I mean, I can only really talk anecdotally on this, to be honest, because it's not something we necessarily covered in the research. I suppose we sort of did talk about it a little bit in the research, in that we believe that there is a necessity for the skills like Reese's skills to be across the workforce. If you think about legacy heating systems, there is, a wide array of contractors, repair people that can, work with gas boilers, radiator heating systems. Whereas this new tech, obviously there is a lack of people who have those skills. But I suppose the question is, it a bigger mismatch issue for social housing? Well, I mean, if you really think about it, we've only got ORP in social housing. Social housing is the field for this at the moment. I suppose the challenge is that if a contractor can go and do it privately, they can probably get more money for it. But yeah, I think there is definitely a challenge around finding the contractors who can do this at time. When I've spoken to some of our members, they've talked about challenges around that contract getting subcontracted and subcontracted. They don't know who's ending up doing the works. And then there's also just like, this is such technical stuff, isn't it? I'm just thinking about my neighbors. My neighbors right now are having full like retrofit works from the outside of their house all the way through the windows, the doors, PV on the roof, solar panel on the roof, the battery, everything. And I mean, even before they got started, they had like 7 different surveyors come to the house. Even now, they don't know when people are going to arrive at the house to do the work. And when you speak to landlords like RSLs about that, they'll say that's because, as much as we try to control that, these contracts are getting subcontracted and subcontracted. So there is real challenges around this. There is some really positive stuff going on. I think about things like ADRA up in Gwynedd, their project Equitable, where they are they're partnered with some big private sector firms like Worcester Bosch, to try and make a dent in this exact problem. As I said, I can only really speak anecdotally. When it comes to the research, we definitely saw importance for the skills and knowledge that Reece obviously has to be wider across RSLs, into customer services, into into the first point of contacts that people have. I think that's important. But yes, and then everything else is sort of anecdotal from me. I'm not an expert on that.
Thanks, Rob. Reece, did you want to come in there? And Vicky's also just put in about the struggles with procurement and supply chain being part of that conversation. Come on, Reece.
I just wanted to add one thing into the mix, purely from the support and encouragement side of things, is that I cannot stress the importance for enthusiasm and how infectious that is. So if you have people who are passionate and eager to about the subject, maybe not decarbonisation, but maybe climate change or climate justice, there are people within the organisations and within the sector, maybe outside the sector, that want to do their part. And if we can tap into that level of enthusiasm and eagerness and passion, that can transpire, and those are the softer skills that maybe we overlook sometimes when it's like, you know, do we have enough installers and do we have enough technicians and so on? But adding that into it, and I'm not saying they aren't, of course we need to put the measures in, but that emphasis and targeting people who are already there and already engaged and switched on to it, tap into that resource already existing.
Oh, goosebumps there, Reese. Brilliant. Yeah. What a way. I think that's a good way to finish, isn't it? Yeah, fab. Thank you. Do you want to wrap up, Catherine, or do you want me to
just to say thank you very much. Apologies for those of you who persevered with some of the technical issues. It's just the risk you run when you do an online event, isn't it? And this recording will be available, as I said. We've put the report in the chat so you can access it there. Or do get in touch with any of us if you would like to hear more. Thank you for staying on for the chat. Thank you, Reese, for joining us, and Rob and Vicky for sharing your really important research with us. And I know there's been a lot of interest in following this up with other organisations and with Welsh Government, and we will continue to share this research and let you all know how we get on with some of the recommendations. Okay, thanks very much all. Goodbye.